Greetings to you all, welcome back to another TSW2 video. Today I thought I'd try driving a German freight train, since I don't really do that, like, at all. Although, recently I did that video where which was essentially just a compilation of nothing but German freight trains. And I think one of the engines that appeared in that video was this, the MRCE BR185.5, which looks a lot like the Deutsche Bahn BR185.2, but obviously it's a different livery and technically a different variation. So, it's a Talent 2, or a pair of Talent, 2 Talent 2s, because that's not at all confusing. Anyway, this is Aachen, more specifically Aachen Hauptbahnhof. And this is of course a city in Germany, but from what I could see on Google Maps the other day, it's actually very close to the border with the Netherlands. Well, either the Netherlands or Belgium, I can't remember which. I dare say there'll be people out there I dare say there's people out there that will correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, my knowledge on like European geography is not the best, to say the least. Anyway, I will not hang around, or try not to hang around here for too long. After all, these containers need to get to their destination. So this MRCE BR185.5 locomotive, from memory, it originally came with the Rhein-Ruhr Osten, Wuppertal to Hagen route. Then, more recently, Dovetail re-released it as part of Nachfolger Dresden. So technically this version that we're driving today is from Rhein-Ruhr Osten, because it was added to Schnellfahrstrecke Köln as like an extra layer in timetable mode, but before Nachfolger Dresden came out. Those are certainly some cool motor sounds, in my opinion. They actually remind me a lot of the Taurus locomotives, like the BR182, and I think it's the OBB class 1116, which is an Austrian variant. And I didn't mean for my sodding phone to go off. It's just some useless notification again. Wouldn't be the first time. Yeah, this is actually very good lighting for getting a shot of an engine crossing this viaduct. Now, for the life of me, I cannot remember what this viaduct's name is. But yeah, I always find that impressive, that like to have a station with a viaduct immediately after one end of the platform. It reminds me a lot of like Durham in England on the East Coast Main Line. Speaking of which, I remember recently I was watching a video from Simon Trains, and he was at Durham, and he was there while a nearby building caught fire, and smoke, from memory, the smoke ended up blowing all the way over towards the station. If I was in that sort of situation myself, I would have done what Simon did and put on some form of mask or scarf, although in my case I would have to be a mask if I went riding on the trains in England. From what I've seen, Simon has an exception, or exception. It's not my business anyway, so I won't talk about it anymore. Anyway, so this Schnellfahrstrecke Köln route is another one of those routes that is very short and should have been extended, because as it stands now, it's only about 70 kilometres long, and this is how it looks on a map. As you can see, there's really no branch lines aside from these piddly little spurs that I think are only used by like AI traffic. And when I say piddly little spurs, I'm not taking the piss out of Tottenham, just to make that very clear. Anyway, so the first station, which you can just about see in the distance there, is Aachen Hauptbahnhof. Once again, I apologise if I get any German place names wrong, which, knowing me and my fantastic knowledge of everything, is probably... it was certainly not up to par. I was just being sarcastic regarding me and my fantastic knowledge of everything. It's almost like Father Jessup and how sarcastic he can be. Father Jessup is the character of Father Ted. That's showing my interest in comedy shows, I guess. Oh, wheel slip. It's probably more likely to have wheel slip in a freight train than you would with a passenger service. And I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a plane flying over my neighbourhood part of the city. It looks a bit like the... Wait, are these pipes even moving? Anyway, so I'm pretty sure that these container textures for Hamburg Süd and Hapag-Lloyd, those are not mods. At least I'm pretty sure they're not like texture mods. But yeah, that's impressive to see these real companies and their branding on these containers. I think in Train Simulator days, when Dovetail did like their Class 66, like the Freightliner version, what have you, they just put up fictional brands on the containers. But here, of course, you just got the real thing straight out of the box. Well, apologies for that long bit of silence. I was just getting some water. In other words, I'm like a steam wheel, wasn't it? No, yeah, I mean, it's good that you can actually open and shut these windows, but what's the station? Einsdorf. From memory, I don't think the Talent 2 units stop here when they do the RE9 service. It's a tunnel. So, yeah, this route was... This Schnellfahrstrecke Köln to Aachen route is included with TSW2 right out of the box, essentially, alongside Sandpatch Grade, which is American, and the Bakerloo line, which is so English it could give Yorkshire puddings a run for their money. And yeah, the big deal, I think, with when Dovetail were marketing like TSW and by extension this route, they were mainly advertising like the BR406 or ICE-3M as like the big star of the route, and to an extent I don't really blame them, because one of the things they were able to work out was how to do high-speed trains properly. And yeah, there's a fair chunk of this route, I think between Düren and Köln-Ehrenfeld, where you really can get up to speed with the ICE-3M, I should okay. No, the ICE-3M is a variant that can run international services, because it's equipped to run on all the other different voltages in like Belgium, France, the Netherlands, and it's not just restricted to domestic operations within Germany itself. What's this station? I think this is Stolberg Rheinland Hauptbahnhof. This is actually where I put a pair of Talent 2s once when I was doing that video about the 3 Talent 2 variants. That's the other thing, that this route not only includes the ICE-3M, but also a 4-car variant of the BR442 or Talent 2. That's the other thing I remember finding out quite recently, is there's actually an awful lot of different variants of the Talent 2. Get them in either 2, 3, 4 or 5-car formations. So I think they're run by both Deutsche Bahn themselves as well as a couple of private operators like National Express. That's the other thing, is that when these windows are closed, you can barely hear the locomotive's horn. Even when they're open, you can barely hear the horn. But no, I'm keeping the windows closed for this run, or at least trying to keep these windows closed, for the simple reason that the wind noise is rather loud. Yes, that speedo and his scoring system of the points is rather silly. That's the other thing. Why is there even this stupid point system in the first place? It's like what I remember, I think, what's his name? Daniel, like Maverick Hunter Daniel once said in one of his Train Sim news show episodes. What did he say? He said something like, if you were to go up to a real engine driver and say to them, do you use an experience point system that rewards you medals after you've driven your train? And then the likely response would be no. Because obviously, like, in real life, you don't get these kinds of silly, you don't really get these kinds of silly point systems. So I don't know why the TSW2 has one, especially when you can't switch it off. Whereas with the old career mode and Train Simulator, you absolutely can switch off that scoring if you want to, and that's what I've done. There's a pair of Talent 2s, or likely on the RE9 service. And that's something else I just thought to mention. This route only includes the BR406 ICE-3M and BR442 Talent 2, which means that when you're doing timetable mode services, the route is very, very boring, or like unrealistically quiet. But that's if you haven't got any other German add-ons installed. Because if you've got like Mein Spessartbahn, you'll see like the BR146/2 electric locomotives and the Doppelstockwagen coaches running like the RE4 service. And from what I gather, RE4 is a service that goes from Aachen to Dortmund through Wuppertal, as you also see it on the Rhein-Ruhr Osten route. Speaking of which, as I said, this BR185.5 that we're driving is from Rhein-Ruhr Osten, and I'll put a link to it in the description, so, well, PC players, because that's what I play on, but I'll put I always put links in the description of my Train Simulator and TSW videos, so that go to Steam and get the add-ons for yourself, and other external sites if there's any mods installed. But as it stands now, I haven't got any mods on this engine. That's the other thing, is that if anyone who's an expert on these locomotives is watching, is this horn sound actually accurate to the real thing? Because I'm still a complete novice when it comes to like knowing about like the unique aspects of these locomotives, especially Germany. I mean, I think I know more about New Zealand locomotives than anything else, and even then I'm still a bit of a novice, despite having gradually researched things for like the last 15 years, or however long ago I started. basically just green signals all the way for this run. I can't imagine it's all that realistic to have greens all the way. Incidentally, I used to know someone whose surname was Green, but I won't say what the first name is, out of respect for their privacy. Oh, we're coming up on I think this is another station that we're going through on the fast line. So you could do like a parody. You could do a parody of the Eagles, live from the fast line. I don't know how to pronounce that name, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a station that the RE9 stops at, and possibly RE4 as well. I don't know about RE4 because I haven't tried driving that service on this route yet. Only between like Wuppertal and Hagen with the BR146/2. And as I was saying earlier, this route is unrealistically quiet if you're just using the ICE-3M and Talent 2 without any other add-ons. If you have, I think primarily if you've got Trainspotter and Rhein-Ruhr Osten, you can also, the engines and units from those routes will be layered into this one as additional services, which makes it a little bit more bearable. But even with those extra routes and the trains, there's the BR185.2 from Trainspotter and some car carrying wagons. Yeah, even when you do have those other add-ons installed, this route is still very, very quiet. I mean, despite like being essentially all over the marketing, the ICE-3M barely appears on this route at all, like in timetable mode. Because I'm pretty sure that the service that's simulated here, which is like, I think it's Brussels in Belgium to Frankfurt am Main, Germany. Yeah, that in this timetable mode, that service is only about like every 2 hours in each direction, and I'm just thinking there's no way like the real ICE services are that infrequent, but I could be wrong for all I know. As for RE9, which is the regional service that you use the Talent 2 for, that's hourly. And again, I don't know if that schedule for RE9 is realistic. What's this? It's a football ground. Oh, it's just a football ground in the middle of like, is it called long distance track and field, or something, or like an athletics track? I remember the college we went to had one of those around the back. Well, I say around the back, but more like on the far side. And then just beyond that sports field was the intermediate school. Both schools are still there today, and they're still roaring. In other words, I should call them lions. Without referencing an obscure Dire Straits song, it's also called Lions. But no, the schools were, the ones I'm referring to are Ortu Moite Intermediate and Ortu Moite College, which are two, I suppose, reasonably well-to-do schools here in Tauranga. What is this bridge? Reminds me of the one near Palo Alto on the Caltrain route across the San Francisco Creek. But I know I don't know what that bridge is about, but I do know it's a sign that we're on the approach to Durin. If I pronounced that right, I probably haven't. And Durin, if I'm not mistaken, is the terminus of the S-Bahn Rhein-Ruhr S19 line. And in train sim world, if you have Rhein-Ruhr Osten, you can see the BR442 units as like AI and drivable services on this section, representing the S-Bahn traffic. Even though, from what I understand, in real life, from what I gather, in real life, a lot of the S-Bahn services around Köln or Cologne are actually run by BR423s, which is curious. You would think that Dovetail would try to do like a slightly updated version of the BR423 that they have with Hauptstrecke München to Augsburg. Yes, so this past Düren station, and I think as far as Köln-Ehrenfeld, the speed limit for the ICE-3Ms goes up to, as you can see there, 250 kilometres an hour. Oh look, it's BR422. So if you're going 250 k's an hour, that's just over 4 kilometres a minute, which is incredibly fast. One thing for sure is that you'll never see trains in New Zealand going anywhere near 200 k's, unless some klutz forgets to set the brakes or something, and they end up rolling down Westmere. Maybe so, but there's no way that Kiwi Rail staff would be that irresponsible. So on this part of the route, you've got it's either 4 or 3 tracks depending on what section, or depending on what section you're at. So the double track section that our engine is on is the fastest lines, which use obviously freight, the ICE intercity regional services. But these platforms, these other 2 tracks are for the S-Bahn trains. I wish I could pronounce that station name properly without risking butchering it. Anyway, so as I said, we started this run at Aachen, and we're going to Köln-Ehrenfeld. Yeah, we don't go all the way to Aachen Hauptbahnhof with these freight services. The main reason I actually wanted to go and to try and ride this engine on a freight service is because of that video I made recently, which was just a compilation of nothing but clips of German freight trains in TSW. And the main reason I wanted to do that is just because I feel that even especially with me, the German train, these freight trains aren't really focused on anywhere near as much as the passenger services. And although, yeah, on a personal note, I do generally prefer passenger services, and that's primarily because a lot of the passenger services, especially the German ones, have a lot of station stops very close together, especially like the S-Bahn München. If you try to do the run between like Hackerbrücke and Mammendorf, I've tried that before with like the BR423, and I'm not kidding when I say this. That is one of the hardest scenarios or challenges or services to drive in TSW. And it's not helped by the BR423's subpar braking. If anything, it should be like what the BR422 is capable of. I feel like I'm having to go for water a lot more often than I should be today. Yeah, because with these freight services, or I guess even with the ICE train, or regional ones even, quite often you'll end up going long distances without stopping, and that can get a little boring sometimes. Speaking of freight trains being boring, the Clinchfield Railroad. I bought that route thinking, because I thought it was going to be quite impressive with all the branch lines that are included. There's about 4 of them, as well as the main line from Dante to Elkhorn City. But the problem with that route is that it's focused solely. This isn't necessarily a problem, but the fact is that it's focused almost solely on American heavy freight trains. And I think this set in 1976. And I've found from my experiences in TSW, and I guess even Train Simulator, these American freight trains are incredibly difficult to keep under control, just because of how long and heavy they can often be. Generally, the only North American freight trains I like to drive in TSW are the ones on the Canadian National Oakville subdivision route, even though that is a very short and linear route. It's only about 21 miles, I think, Oakville to Hamilton in the Canadian province of Ontario. And from what I gather, that area is not actually that far from Toronto. I mean, it's obvious, because if you go along that route, you will see like 3 or 4 GO transit stations. Burlington being one of them. That's the point. I do wish that Dovetail Games had added like some GO transit, like MP40 PH-3C locomotives and bi-level cars. Because as it stands, the route just feels very dull, lifeless, with just the freight wagons and the 2 Canadian National diesels. So, just thought, what do you make of me like putting commentary on these videos? I'm just curious, because it's kind of weird hearing your own voice, like when you listen to the recording afterwards, but at the same time, I still think it's a fun idea, because because hopefully, with me talking over what I'm driving, you can, I'm hoping that it'll make the videos a bit more interesting. There's another BR442. Yes, you can post your opinions on this commentary in the comments. I realise that sounds a little silly, but anyway. Yeah, I do intend to keep up this putting in the voiceover, although there might be some videos in the future where I don't add one. Like I'm thinking I'll do another Trains at Speed compilation using footage from TSW, and that probably won't feature commentary. It's because what I would try to do with that video is like to try and have very tight edits, so not a lot of time between passing of one, like the intro fading in, one train passing, then cutting to the next scene. I think I did that sort of edit on the first Trainspotting, Trains at Speed in TSW video. What's this station? This is, I think is that Holland or Horem or Hodem? I really do apologise to any German people watching, but yeah, my pronunciation more often than not is rubbish. So at this point we're still on that section where the ICE trains can go up to 250 km an hour. But if what that speed dial on the HUD there is anything to go by, it looks to me like with this locomotive, or with this BR185.5, we can't go any faster. Well, it's not letting us go any faster than 150. Although only now, a very long time into the run, I look up here and I see this label that I think it's saying that the max speed for this engine is 140. And I didn't realise that until now, but no, I think I will, on that note, I think I will try to maintain 140 for the rest of this trip. Hasn't got too far to go. Considering that we're going about, just over 2 kilometres a minute, we should be there. We should be at Köln-Ehrenfeld in less than 10 minutes. No, I just noticed that score is now a DC's number, DC 4035, or at least it was a DC's number. What's that other train? Or is that even another train? No, but DC 4035 was one of New Zealand's DC class diesel locomotives. They were rebuilt from DAs or EMD G12s between about 1978 and 1983, I would say. 4035 was one of the DCs that got refurbished in the early 2000s for commuter service in Auckland, where she ran initially in top and tail formation with classmate 4415 and some very heavily rebuilt ex-British Rail Mark II coaches, which are classified as SA and SD, SD being the cab car. They kept using the DCs on these diesel locomotives on suburban services in Auckland until 2015, when the CAF built AM electric units took over all suburban services north of Papakura. As it stands now, there is just one diesel commuter service left in the Auckland network, and it's the shuttle from Papakura to Pukekohe, which is run by the now 40-year-old ex-Perth ADL class DMUs. Although, from what I understand, work has finally commenced on electrification of that section between Papakura and Pukekohe. But from what I gather, in September next year, the ADLs are going to be withdrawn, and then the Pukekohe shuttle will be replaced by buses until they can get the electrification finished. Although I dare say they'll still have to keep the main trunk open for the freight services as well as Te Huia. Something else I've just remembered is that I'm pretty sure the trains in Germany run, or the main track gauge in Germany is 4 foot 8.5 inch or standard gauge. If you see that little line thing running in between the running rails, I think I've got the cursor set up to appear on the recording. So if you can see where I'm pointing the cursor, that little almost like wire down the middle of the track, I think that's for the LZB in-cab signalling or cruise control system. I don't really remember how LZB works. That's the other thing, is that I always drive these German engines or units with the fancy safety systems off. I know that's not realistic, but I just find these safety systems like PZB and CIFA far too complicated. And more power to the people that do drive in this game with PZB and LZB and CIFA enabled. It's kind of funny how it's like a digital screen, but yet it's set up with like analog to display analog dials. Heck, even that clock there has an analog-esque display on a digital screen. That's something else I've just realised, is that I don't know anything about the history of these BR185.5 locomotives. Come to think of it, I don't even know what MRCE is. But I dare say it's a private. Freight operator. So that's what the 100 km speed limit was for, going for a crossover. Because yeah, I remember that the other week when I did get some footage in the game of trains at Köln-Ehrenfeld, that you got the 4 tracks for the passenger trains for each of the platforms. Oh, there's another DC's number on the score there, 4755. At Köln-Ehrenfeld you get the 4 main tracks for the passenger trains, and there's 4 platforms. But off to the northern side, you also have the 2 extra tracks for the freight trains. And yeah, we're ending our run at Köln-Ehrenfeld, where another driver, which will just be, in this game's case, it'll be AI, will take over control of this locomotive, and then it'll head off to some other place in Germany. I don't know where. And the name of the service doesn't help you at all when it comes to figuring out where this train is starting and where it's going. There's an ICE-3M going the opposite direction, I think towards Brussels. I'm not mistaken, Brussels is the capital of Belgium. Also, what's that big needle over there? It's like it reminds me like the one I've seen on the Frankfurt U-Bahn route, as well as even I think the Seattle Space Needle, or like the CN Tower in Toronto, or all those other big towers with pointy tips. So I don't really know what else to say, to be honest, since we're fast approaching the end of the run. I think I'll just focus on, for the time being, I think I'll just focus on making sure I don't go through that red signal, which, if you can see, like the distance counter is, from what I can tell, just past the marker. And if you go past the red signal in this game, it will just throw you out of the scenario without any mercy. And yeah, it's very unforgiving, to say the least. And I have learned that the hard way. Oh, there's enough space to stop in time. Right, well this run hasn't been all that bad. Very uneventful, of course. It's not like real life where you could get random disruptions from like late running passenger trains or anything. TSW doesn't have any of those. It's what I've seen. And we've made it. Yeah, that didn't take anywhere near as long as I thought it would. But no, that was the run from Aachen Hauptbahnhof to Köln-Ehrenfeld with the MRCE BR185.5. And I would also like to say thank you for watching, and I hope you'll stick around. On the channel for more videos in a similar format to this one. As I said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.